Greetings. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks, Sr., your host, and this is Community Forum. We're very fortunate this evening to have with us two distinguished individuals. One is Lake County Circuit Judge Jay Ukina of the 19th Judicial Circuit, and we have also Attorney at Law Gonzalo Gomez. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be discussing issues in the family division, and I will be learning right along with you about what is current in the family division. Greetings, folks.
Hey, greetings, Dr. Brooks.
Good evening, Dr. Brooks.
Judge Ukina, you are the presiding judge of family division, I guess since November 2008, and graduate of Lake Forest College and John Marshall Law School. And you had mentioned you were attorney for 28 years, right?
I was in practice of law for 28 years before I got elected in November 2008. And I was assigned to the Family Law Division in February 2009. And in December 2010, I was appointed the presiding judge of that division when Judge Ortiz, who had been the presiding judge, moved on to the civil division. And
tell us about the mission of the goals and objectives in the family division.
Well, are similar really to the goals and objectives of the 19th Judicial Circuit, and that's really to serve the public and to accomplish that in a fair and efficient manner, and to also we're committed to excellence in fostering public trust. And that's the general overall mission of the 19th Judicial Circuit. In the Family Law Division, of course, we handle paternity cases, divorce cases. We interface with the Criminal Division on domestic violence, and that's sort of the general things that we do in the Family Law Division. There are 6 judges in that division. 4 of them have contested courtroom and trial courts, and one is a backup judge who we send out some of the contested motions to, and then another judge which does the child support call and things that are called divorce prove-ups. That's when the case is settled, you go in front of a judge and on a public record lay out what the terms of the parenting agreement or the marital settlement agreement and the like are.
I noticed that you, I guess that was 2011, you were appointed to serve a year's term with the Illinois Child Support Advisory Committee.
Well, yeah, that committee is really a group of both like lawyers, attorneys, and other people in child support enforcement. And the purpose of that is to really redraft the child support laws of the state to make it hopefully fairer and like that. And actually that group is still meeting. I was reappointed in 2012 and just reappointed again in 2013. And
Judge Ukina, what really piqued your interest into getting into the law profession?
Well, my father sort of encouraged me. My father was a Protestant minister, and he always said that, you know, you should pick a profession in which you serve the public. And of course he said I could be, of course he gave me then 3 choices: a minister, a doctor, or a lawyer. And my interest in school, both in high school and college, really was more in the area of history and government. So I just slowly involved my way over there. And graduated from Lake Forest College with a major in government and a minor in economics and psychology. Although I didn't take the straight route to law school, I worked a series of jobs before I went back to school and got a law degree, including being a caseworker for the Cook County Department of Public Aid and also a school teacher in Chicago. Although I primarily have lived in Lake County for probably the last 40, 45 years.
Now, is it the goal of an attorney to become a judge?
Depends on the person. You know, some of the goal is just to stay an attorney. You know, I thought after a number of years of practicing law that I thought I could serve the public as a judge. And I often talk about, you know, Plato had the philosopher king theory in the Republic, but he didn't really, not that you want to call a judge a philosopher king, but after you practice law for a number of years, you evolve to a point where you think you got probably a lot better understanding of what's happening, and think that maybe you can move on and have a more important position, not important, but a more influential position in helping resolving matters. And at some point I decided that's the direction I wanted to head. And in 2008 I got elected circuit judge.
Attorney Gonzalo Gomez, you're an attorney at law also, and I'm going to give you the same opportunity that I gave Judge Yukana. Tell our listening audience, well, first of all, about your personal and professional background.
Well, I'm prior military.
Okay.
And I'm a graduate of Western Illinois University for my bachelor's degree. And I graduated from Chicago King College of Law.
Okay.
And as far as my background, I have a great uncle that was a judge in Cuba, and my brother is an attorney as well. He's Harvard Law educated, and I follow through with basically family tradition, if you will.
You know, I don't hold that against you. I'm an Illinois State alumni.
Okay.
We had some good battles between the Leathernecks and the Redbirds.
Yes.
You know. What about the family law? What piqued your interest there in family law? Or what are some of your challenging experiences that you've had there?
Well, at first, it all had to do with my desire to get into litigation. And by enjoying litigation and wanting to be involved in litigation, I was affiliated with another attorney who practiced family law.
Okay.
And there was a lot of litigation in that office in particular. And through experience and basically a piqued interest in litigation, that I put both of those together to come out with the end result, which is practicing in family law division and getting involved in family law related litigation.
What are some of the issues that present themselves in criminal charges?
Well, there's domestic violence offenses that people are arrested for, domestic battery and such, dealing with both with spouses, with children, with other family members that are defined in Domestic Violence Act as being of a domestic related issue. That's mainly what I practice and mainly what I offer my assistance and to my clients.
You involved quite a bit with DCFS, Department of Children and Family Services.
Yes, I've also represented clients in administrative law issues relating with the Department of Children and Family Services as well.
What are some of the challenging experiences that you've had with DCFS?
Well, it's an informal type setting, but at the same token, it's still subject to the rules of procedure, Illinois civil rules of procedure. They're followed like they would in any type of court-related issue, if I was at the court or there. A lot of it, it all depends upon what my client has or has not made available to me, or made known to me, or what they have overly made available to either police departments or to DCFS investigators to begin with, that may or may not be exactly what they wanted to say or come across as saying, but they end up being basically misinterpreted at times.
Judge, I would like for you to tell our listening audience, I keep saying listening audience, but I'm learning right along with the listening audience too, about the Family Court Mediation Program.
Well, we have a couple levels. I mean, first of all, there's mediation on several different levels. We have a volunteer mediation program that's run through those 4 contested courtrooms, in which we have people who are unrepresented, maybe pro se's, as they say, on both sides, and we've involved them with the mediators on certain days during the month. We also have a list of approved mediators who people can go to try to resolve the case. In the area of child custody, it's really through Supreme Court rules and some of our local rules, basically how a case would begin is they file the case, and approximately 90 days later, there's a case management conference where both sides come in. In a new system we really started last summer, we put it on a track and eventually set a trial date at that time. But if you don't have a parenting agreement in place, at that case management call, then you have to go to mediation to work it out. If mediation fails, of course, then you go back and you start to go through that procedure. But mediation comes through in a multiplicity of levels.
Well, what exactly is mediation?
Well, what's the term mediate? You know, you try to resolve the matter without having to have a contest. You know, you try to find a common ground between, you know, both sides, and particularly in custody matters, you're really trying to figure out what is in the best interest of the children, and the mediator really is trying to convince the parents what is in the best interest of the children in that situation.
Now, how is a mediator chosen?
Well, I'm not going to get into all the qualifications, but we have qualifications under the local rule, certain courses, certain experience to be approved as a mediator. And CLC puts on a class each year, and there's other you know, courses around that are offered, you know, through the Bar Association and the like.
Mm-hmm. When you have mediation, who are all the parties that's supposed to be there?
Depending how the people want to do it, but you can have the parties, their attorneys, and the mediator. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But generally, they want to, you know, talk with the parties and try to get them to work it out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. If one of the parties refuses mediation, then what? Well,
if it looks like it's going to be fruitless, then you simply go back and begin what they call the discovery process. And of course, we also have other methods to try to resolve the case. One of the dates that this gets set along the way before you come to a trial is called a pretrial conference, in which the attorneys will meet with the judge to show what the differences still are in the case, what the differences might be in the custody arena or the financial arena. And at that point, the judge tries to bring the parties together, tries to resolve it. Lots of times the judges will talk with the attorneys in chambers. Sometimes the judge will meet with the attorneys and the parties out in the courtroom to try to get people to resolve the matter amicably.
Mm-hmm. The Attorney Gomez, how important it is to have the attorney at the point of contact, you know, between the parties involved, you know?
In my opinion, at the earliest inception would be the best. A lot of times that isn't feasible. It doesn't at times realize itself in that manner, but if I can ever make anything of an importance, it's to involve your attorney at the earliest inception that you possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is that can be very challenging. A person could either, I guess, win or lose a case, I guess, if the attorney is not present in the beginning, then, right?
Very true. It varies at times, but I think it's important for someone who's not familiar with any of aspects of the law, especially that they find themselves confronting, if you don't know, to find someone who does know or is familiar or does know enough about that area of the law to be able to give them advice, and that person, in my opinion, would be the attorney.
If a person, what do they call a person that wants to be attorney for himself?
He who represents himself has a fool for a lawyer.
Okay.
Or for a client, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, right. Well, tell us, we talk about problems in dealing discipline in children now, but tell us about the proper disciplines for children.
The proper discipline, I would say that lays within the home. The only thing I can really much give anyone any advice would be, especially with physical discipline of children, make sure that it's something that is reasonable, because that is the gauge that you're going to be, it's going to be judged upon you, is how you reacted, what you did, and whether what you did was reasonable or not. And as aspects I could emphasize as well, especially step parents nowadays in today's society, is to let the parents themselves be your significant other and their former person of interest, or however you want to put it, a spouse or whomever they share that parenthood with that child, to be the sole persons involved with that type of what this physical discipline, if any, is going to be basically imposed upon this child. So that's my recommendation is to make sure that if you do this, that you're reasonable, and if it's basically not a child that you have in common, make sure that those parents are making those decisions and you don't impose your will upon that child either.
We had a grandchild years ago, and my wife threatened to spank her, and she said, "I'm going to call the police." It's amazing that a young elementary school kid, but I guess the mother had taught him, I guess, you know, that call the police if incidents happen. But you have cases. How far can people go with spankings now?
They could take it far at cases. Sometimes they've taken it far. Sometimes it's cases where there is some reasonableness, and it all, again, you're looking for an interpretation by a judge or a jury when you're faced with those type of situations of whether or not you acted reasonable or not. So whether or not you impose this or choose not to, and what level to take it to, it's something you're going to have to judge for yourself. It's very difficult for anyone to really say it's reasonable, but just remember that if you are confronted with this and you are placed in front of a judge and a jury on this, you're going to be also looking for what these people, what your community thinks is reasonable, or if you acted in a reasonable manner, or for the judge for that matter, whether or not they believe that what physical discipline you imposed was reasonable or not. So, I mean, it all depends upon the circumstances. So that's a very difficult question to really answer. And I've seen it go either way.
I might ask you another difficult question. There's a correlation between the building of prisons. Now we have a problem in this country, probably more people in prison than any other country, I guess. But you think there's a correlation between building of new prisons and spankings or whatever, you know?
I don't believe so. I don't believe. I think that goes into many faceted, but I mean solely as a spanking situation. I don't think that many people that are accused of this, unless it's a very heinous offense that's been committed with severe consequences, do I think that these people end up actually being imprisoned for these acts. But other than that, I don't see that to be a correlating factor in the building of additional prisons in this country.
Why is there so many prisons built?
Because we have an increase of defendants being convicted in our courts. There's, with those increasing numbers, there is also the need to be able to house them in a proper institution that will be able to fit their needs rather than overcrowding them in a smaller type of facility than to build a bigger one. And unfortunately, and this is my personal opinion, there's money involved in it. It's profitable. Sometimes to the privatization of some of these prison systems, if you look, that's another correlating factor. There's money to be made because there's an increased number of people being convicted of felony offenses that require imprisonment.
Well, you see the legislature upping the ante on penalties and what sentences can be, and I think that contributes to some of it. Although a lot of the court systems in the 19th Judicial also have, diversion programs where you try to take the first offender and get them into programs and have different specialty courts like Lake County's got.
There's a drug court, your mental health court.
There's a veterans court now, and so there's different programs that try to divert people away from the prison system and put them through some loops and training and different things and like that to keep them out of the prison system and hope to make sure that they don't repeat. And there's a coalition for prevent recidivism like that, which Waukegan Township has, and different programs like that are all efforts to try to stop at the beginning when someone makes their the first problem with the judicial system and like that.
What about the coalition, since you mentioned that, to reduce recidivism? You would have the person been incarcerated, has a felon on his record, and if he violates his probation, he's right back in prison again. But is that a fair?
Well, they talk about the rate of people who have served their sentence who reoffend.
Okay.
And also part of that reoffending comes down to the ability to get a job or not get a job. And that coalition helps to try to get people who have criminal convictions employment. Because getting employment once you get out is a key to not reoffending. And that's part of what the Coalition to Prevent Recidivism does.
Back to mediation, though. Who really pays for the mediation?
Well, it depends on the situation, but like I said, I went back, there's the volunteer program, which is free, but you have to be unrepresented, both parties, to be able to qualify for that.
Okay.
Otherwise, the parties pay, according to their ability to pay. And,
okay.
and there are orders that are entered when, and like I said, we get an approved list of mediators. They can pick the mediator they want. The two attorneys can agree. If they can't agree, then the judge would pick it. And different mediators charge different hourly rates. So, and you look at the economic circumstances of the two parties going through mediation on how they're going to share. I mean, if you've got let's say we've got the husband who's been the prime wage earner and the wife has stayed at home raising the kids, then most of that's going to be on the prime wage earner. If they both work, depending on their incomes, it could be a 50-50 split. But primarily it comes out of the pocket of the parties going to mediation.
This is very expensive, go through mediation.
Well, it can be, but once again, you have a different range of what mediators charge, and people can call off the mediation when they want. Okay. If they can't get it, I mean, if it looks like it's going to be fruitful, it gets stopped. It can be expensive, and sometimes it's not. It just depends on each case is unique to itself.
So there are cases that are not appropriate for mediation, then, too, right?
If they can make the case to the judge, it's not going to be fruitful. You can not go to mediation and just move on with the case.
Okay. Okay. I would say, Attorney Gomez, what are some of the challenging cases that you've had in your practice?
Overall, it's been people failing to meet at basically in denial of what position they are in life, especially in the family law division, and in their letting their own personal feelings or their emotions get involved with the overall good for themselves and for their family. Mm-hmm. Litigation is a very expensive venture. Like the judge was, he was talking about mediation. That is less expensive, even though it may cost a party anywhere a couple of thousand, less than $1,000. That is at least minimal in comparison to the end result of a very tedious, a very involved litigation process that could take years to resolve. Overall, coming to a resolution, a mutual agreeable resolution, is the best interest of the family, in my opinion. That's in their best interest to come to some kind of an agreement to make their own decisions instead of allowing someone that they don't know, being a judge, make their decisions for the rest of their lives they're going to be living with.
And we always encourage them to try to settle the case because the parties have control of the case on a certain level to be able to settle. And once they go to trial, they lose that control, and that control then goes to the judge. And I point that out, quite a bit to the parties who don't seem to want to settle the case. Mm-hmm. That it's far better for them to settle it because they can control on some level what's going to happen in the disposition of the case. But once it goes to trial, then they lose, I say, complete control of the case, and the judge is going to, in family law, there are no juries, except maybe if you've been charged with domestic battery or something. So it goes completely then to what the judge is going to decide.
Mm-hmm. Attorney Gomez, had you ever thought about why there are more minorities in prison than in other groups? In a certain age groups, maybe 70–80% of minorities, I guess maybe in I don't know the age, you probably can give me the statistics better than I can quote them. But have you ever thought about why there's more?
A lot of it has to do with poverty.
Okay.
A lot of the people are in prison that end up in that situation lack the abilities to hire and retain a private attorney in order to represent them. A lot of times there wasn't enough there isn't enough financial ability to maintain any type of defense on a lot of the issues that come to play. I think that's the number one issue. I think it is. It also has to do with financial abilities, their ability to. Poor people are more likely than not to serve time in prison than those that aren't afflicted by poverty. I think poverty, that's my opinion as to why that would reflect in that way it does.
I think a lot of it is a social economic situation. You really talk, the lower the income, lots of times, the greater the chance someone might commit a crime, and that's, I think, really where you get the, when you say it's a large number of minorities, it is, but it's also a large number of poor people, regardless of what their racial or ethnic background is.
Mm-hmm. And we look at the cost of incarceration too, maybe at least $40,000 per for the state level, and maybe a $90,000 to $100,000 for maybe a little higher, maybe at least $90,000 per inmate for federal prison. So it gets kind of expensive, but that to house inmates.
It does. It's a very financially cumbersome situation all the way around. For not only for the people that unfortunately end up in that situation, but also for the government as well. I mean, we spend increasing large number of our tax money in order to maintain these facilities. So there's a high cost involved. Mm-hmm. And there seems to be a growing number of these, like you pointed out, Dr. Brooks, there's a growing number of these prisons being built. So, I mean, the cost is increasing to everyone. It's affecting everyone all the way around.
I have another statistic, always we're driven by data, but if a child is having difficulties, something about the third grade education, if the child is having problems by the third grade level, that child is going to get progressively behind as they go through school, and by the time the child gets to high school, young adult, they're going to get discouraged and drop out of school, and once they drop out, they're going to do the things that cause them to be incarcerated, and they get in the system, and most of the time they just never get out. But something about I don't know where you got that data or not, but something about the third grade there, if they're behind there, they're going to get behind all the way, get progressively behind. Of course, it makes sense, though. If you get behind, you're going to get progressive behind.
Well, once you get behind, it's harder to catch up. Some people do catch up, and others don't, and I've never seen a study on it, but reflecting back to my years when I did teach school, and I was a day-to-day sub in Area C in Chicago.
Okay.
And you could see kids uniformly, no matter what neighborhood, what the school was, kindergarten, first, second grade, they all seem to be right on tune, and then some kids would slowly start to, in the third or fourth grade, it appears, when I think about it, starts to slowly, grow. Some do grow away or get behind, and you are right that the further you fall behind, the less likely you are to finish high school. If you don't finish high school, the more likely you can get in trouble and get involved in the criminal justice system.
Okay.
And a lot of it comes back to being able to work and get a job and get employment.
Would you agree, Attorney Gomez, that I may be sticking my neck out here, but you get what you pay for in getting an attorney?
Sometimes that is the result, unfortunately. And like Judge was basically emphasizing is that if the lack of education, I think in this in the current economy that we have, the less educated you are, the more likely it is that you're going to be suffering from unemployment. Okay. And the more limited you are as to what's available to you financially. Mm-hmm. And that leads a lot of people to take the wrong path. It unavoidably does. And now, especially since our downward trek of our economies of lately and the increase in the amount of unemployment, that at times, throughout the times, if you do a study of it, will show that crime does increase during these times. It does. Some places it does, some places it doesn't, but there is an increase, without a doubt.
We may go into this. What do you look for when you look for an attorney? What if I want to employ an attorney, what do I look for?
I would look for someone that's practices in the field that you're seeking representation in.
Okay.
Through your bar, so you can contact the bar associations of Lake County Bar, Cook County, and the Northwest Suburban Bar Association in Cook County, DuPage County Bar Association. You can contact them, and they have lists of attorneys that what they specialize in, and you can go from there. And like you would shop for groceries or you look for a car, I would look for an attorney that is qualified, that has a reputation to be able to adequately represent me or whomever in their current predicament.
Yeah, and you should probably go and almost like interview the attorney. I mean, you can listen to your friends on the street tell you who's best, but sometimes they're not as accurate as they could be. You know, it's better to meet with the attorney, see what the attorney's background is, see the experience the attorney has, and see how comfortable you feel with that particular attorney. You know, and I think that will increase your chances of getting good representation. And I don't want to say that the more you pay, the better representation necessarily get. You know, I mean, first of all, I think the Lake County Public Defender's Office is a very good office. They've got really quality attorneys who can give you as good a defense as most criminal defense attorneys can, but you have to qualify for them economically. So if you have the money, you don't qualify for them, and there's some really fine, outstanding attorneys. And you can look at, you know, a couple of the cases that made the headlines in Lake County, like the Jerry Hobbs case in Zion. You know, that was a case where Mr. Hobbs was represented by the Public Defender's Office, and they're the ones that were able to do the last test on the DNA or get it done to exonerate him. You know, so like I said, you've got some high-quality attorneys who sit in that Lake County Public Defender's Office.
I agree with the judge, too. Just because you're paying more for the attorney doesn't mean you're going to get the best attorney.
Okay, right. Well, speaking of the family division now, what constitutes family now? You want to
Well,
talk
it changes a little bit from time to time, but basically the family division is dissolution of marriage cases, used to be known as divorce, paternity cases.
Okay.
We have the child support division, not in the family law division, but the Lake County State's Attorney's Office, you know, enforces, you know, child support.
Okay.
And we have a court call for them every week. Adoptions now are actually handled by the juvenile division. They used to be handled by us, and we sort of reorganized things.
Okay.
And that's what you see now. I mean, and then you also have what we call post-decree cases. You have the initial case, the divorce. Eventually, that divorce gets entered. Afterwards, there can be enforcement issues. Something could happen where maybe one of the parents thinks there should be a change of custody. People can get awarded maintenance, formerly known as alimony. You know, and certain things can take place, what they call substantial change of circumstances, or there can be review dates. So all sorts of things, both before and after. I think the average judge in Lake County in the family law division and contested courtroom probably has about 700 active cases at a time in front of them. You know, and there's probably about, to give you an idea on the volume, there's probably about, on an average over the last 20 years, it hasn't really gone up or down, about 2,500 to 2,600 new divorce cases are filed a year. You know, but well, they say the divorce rate is going on when you actually think that the Lake County population has gone up, but the number of divorces hasn't gone up. You know, it might be slowing up, well, not slowing up, but it's not the same rate it might have been a few years ago. And so those are the type of things that are done in the family law division. I could probably spend an hour going through the nuances of all of them. But,
well, I've tried not to contribute to it. I have the 28th of this month, I'll have 55 years of marriage.
oh, very good, Dr. Brooks.
Congratulations.
So I'm trying to, we have people now, don't stay together 55 minutes, you know.
Well,
The minute they
well, I'm trying to do the same thing. See, in May, I'll be 37 years married.
congratulations. And you're the same opportunity that you're.
I'm going on my second year.
Okay, right. You got a little what's ahead of you there. Yeah, very encouraging. Well, do you shop around for same like you do an attorney for a private for mediator?
Well, there are private mediators you can probably go to, but at the same time, the attorneys have pretty good knowledge of who, you know, the levels and the different abilities of the different mediators and who might be better in a particular area and not. And generally, you can leave that up to your attorneys to really look around. and you really want a mediator who's been certified in the area. There's a certain number of classes and continuing legal education that you have to perform, and I believe it's every 2 years, the circuit judges of Lake County, the Family Division, we then recertify people as mediators. There's also other areas in which we certify people in other sort of classifications of people who help the judges. We can appoint an attorney, a guardian ad litem on a custody case to do an investigation for the judge, or we can appoint an attorney to be the child's representative to independently represent the child in a custody matter like that. And they also have to a certain continuing legal education requirement and to be recertified every 2 years. And then we also have what they call court evaluators. I think the section numbers is 604Bs, but they're psychologists or social workers or psychiatrists who deal in family law, and we bring them into custody cases at times, or the attorneys bring them in. The 604B is really one that is the court's expert, and the section number for the expert for the either party is 604.5. But these are people who also come in to weigh in, to give the judge extra eyes in a case, where maybe there's a contentious divorce, or if there's been allegations of abuse, which come in periodically, some founded, some unfounded. And if a judge needs someone to do a rather quick investigation to get a grip on what's happening in that case, you appoint someone like a guardian ad litem to go out and do an investigation, who is an attorney, and then report back to the court to sort of give you an overview so you can get sort of control of what's happening. Because sometimes people try to get a leg up on a case at the beginning by making some allegations that might not be completely accurate or be very subjective. So
now, can a spouse and individual go? They have to take the court referral. Can they go to mediation without a court referral?
There are some who mediate, separate from the court, and sometimes, those can be some of the families who have a little more money, and their attorneys might get them into some mediation process at the beginning.
There's also a thing called collaborative divorces that are done, and those cases, the parties, before they even make the courts get involved, before they involve the courts in their particular case, they have already spoken with a set of attorneys that practice in this collaborative law, and they try to reach an agreement before they even file for the divorce. And a lot of times that is less expensive than going through the litigation process to begin with as well. I mean, there's pros and cons to anything, but a lot of people, if they're able to come to an agreement before that's done, that saves not only time and money for themselves, but also saves the court time from being, like the judge mentioned earlier. I mean, the court call cases sometimes can be voluminous, and you'll have a lot of cases in front of the judge. And a lot of these things alleviate that particular aspect of court call cases for everyone, and cost-wise for themselves. I mean, if you're able to get to that point, I would suggest that if you're able to do it and want to do it, to try it.
Now, you don't have to have a lawyer for a mediator then, but it's recommended.
It depends on the individual. I mean, there's some very good mediators who are not lawyers, but at the same time, you don't have to be, a lawyer to be a mediator. And what we've done recently to try to, we think, cut the cost down, but also to get people through the process a little less painless is that it had been for years, we have a trial call in the afternoon, and basically an attorney would say it would be a 4-day trial. Well, at the end of the 4 days, it's not over. Then you have to pick and choose a time, and some of these trials could last a year, being a couple days each month. Last August, we put a trial call system in place in Lake County. It was one of the first in the Chicago area. The Civil Division has had one for a number of years. The Criminal Division has them, but what we do is when they come in that case management call I talked to you about earlier tonight, you put them on a track. It can be, if it's a simple case, it can be an expedited track where 9 months there'll be a trial, or it could be 12 months, it's going to be a trial, or 15 months, and it can be a trial. And those are some of the things we've done. But also, we have a trial week, so once you start the trial, it ends in that period of time or goes on to the next one, so people don't have to wait around for a year to see what's going to happen. So we've tried to do that, and by doing that, it cuts back the cost, because I think when the trial's tried over a period of a year, the attorneys are constantly trying to refresh their memory, which is billable time. Here, and so are the judges trying to refresh the memory on what happened in the last. This makes it a whole lot simpler. It's been very effective so far. We've gone through about 4 months. We started in the first part of December, actually going through these trial calls. And every fourth week, I have a trial call. The other 3 weeks, I'm doing routine motions and pre-trials and the other things that go with the contested call.
Does it really make a difference when having a male or female judge when children are involved?
In my opinion, no.
I agree with counsel here. I don't think it really does. It depends on the individual judge, but I think, and I can only really speak for Lake County. I think in Lake County, right now you've got 4 judges who basically are very good, regardless. You got to look at the facts of the case. Each time, because you can award custody to either parent. You try to encourage joint custody. The whole issue is really to try to get parents to do joint custody, to work together. It keeps both parents involved. It's better for the kids. I know there are some attorneys out there that runs ads about fathers' rights and things like that. But I think if you really look at the system, and I really can speak for our county, but I think it's also true of DuPage and McHenry and Cook, is whether you're a father or whether you're a mother, you're treated equally.
Now, there are cases then, I think we talked about this, not appropriate for mediation?
Well, I don't know what you mean. It really deals on the personalities of the parties. There's some personalities that just, mediation doesn't work. No matter how effective the mediator is.
Right. Can you comment on the situation that's going on the Supreme Court now? What is marriage? I mean, what is the? It's
all in the eye of the beholder, Dr. Brooks.
I think it's a very difficult question. The Supreme Court right now is struggling trying to determine as well. I read an article before I came in today. It is not an easy question to answer, and right now it's going to be determinative about our Supreme Court. And from what I last heard, even Justice Kennedy was saying that this case should never ended up in their lap. I think they've.
What's he saying? It should be at the state level, or it should not be?
It's ended up in there. It's not. I think it ended up in the right place. They're saying that it shouldn't have and I think mainly they're saying that's because it's such a difficult issue to tackle and determine, and especially when it has to do with people's rights, one way or the other.
That's the key.
It can be effective. I mean, that's a very difficult question, Dr. Brooks, and I hope the Supreme Court can muster their wise decision and give us some direction of how we're going to go from now on.
Yeah, that is very difficult.
Very much so.
Because actually what happened is that you got religion involved there too, and you have the rights involved, because the Bible spells it out, I guess, but legally, I guess.
I think the Bible, just like the law, is up for interpretation. And that's why there's so many diverse religions. And I think
got over 3,000 denominations in the world.
And you can look in the United States right now. Different Protestant churches have different views on it. The Catholic Church has their view. It's like I said, up for interpretation.
And I think that's why so many people like myself have a job.
Okay.
We continue to have one because of these issues and how complex they can be.
Okay. Now, we've been dealing mainly, and the whole program is about the family division there, but there are many aspects then of the court system. I could mention, is there a certain time limit that you spend in the family before you move to the next area?
Not necessarily. It's basically this: the associate judges, they tend to get moved around a little bit, and you give them a background in each of the areas of law. But at the same time, each division's a little different, and you've really got to look at getting a judge experience in a division. And the longer they spend, the more experienced they are. But and circuit judges, can on one level sort of, by seniority, choose the assignment they want. And associate judges, do get on every so many years, you can get moved to a new division.
Tell us about how many associate judges and how many circuit court judges?
So there's 39 judges, I believe, in Lake County right now. I think we just added 2 more circuit judges after the last election. There's 15 circuit judges and 24 associate judges.
Okay, okay.
And I'm sure Judge Foreman will correct me if I just made a mistake.
Yeah, he's one that's waiting his turn to be on community forum too, though he's anxious to be on along with his wife too. There, I mean, she's an outstanding person.
And one of the things Judge Foreman, our chief judge, is doing right now, and Judge Rossetti, who was there before him, have helped to do is push through a new building program, because we are short courtrooms right now, but now they've approved the building of a criminal justice building directly across the street from the main courthouse, and the groundbreaking on that will probably start sometime this fall and be completed within a few years to add a good number of new courtrooms. And it also puts the criminal division closer to the jail. I think so there's less security problems in transporting prisoners, but there's some nice plans out there. I think it's going to really make the criminal justice system and the court system itself far more effective and live up to its mission a lot more.
Attorney Gomez, is that one of your goals, long-range goals, to be a judge?
No, it isn't. I have a lot of respect for a lot of, I have colleagues that become judges. For myself, personally, no. It is a very responsible job. I know a lot of judges. I'm familiar with them and basically the responsibilities that they have, and it's a very difficult one. They have their jobs cut out for themselves. They really do. I have a lot of respect for them, but as far as it being for me, I don't think at this moment in time I can say it is.
Fantastic. Back to mediation, Judge, you're gonna, if the persons refuse to go to mediation, then what's the next step then?
Well, mediation isn't on every case, but the next step is just to proceed with the case.
Okay.
You know, and then you've got, like I said, these case management orders that just sort of give deadlines to get discovery done, to you know, get whatever financial records in place. I think earlier I touched on the fact that certain experts can be brought into a case in child custody, so it's time to go out and they'll interview, maybe do psychological testing if necessary, you know, to put a report together, you know, for the court and like that. So it just proceeds on if mediation, and sometimes even cases that have failed at mediation resolve themselves. Most cases actually resolve themselves.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, is that right?
You know, I've been given numbers by court administration that probably only 3% of the divorce cases actually go to trial. Although some are resolved on the eve of trial, what we call hard pre-trials, where you really sit down and try to get it done. You know, and then sometimes even our trial week will start out with that. You know, and so it's like I said, that's the number that's been given to me. I tend to think it's probably slightly higher go to trial, but that's the number court administration gave me a year or two ago.
Then what makes mediation successful then, in your opinion?
A good mediator. You know, and there's some good ones there, but and it's the ability of the parties really to get the mediator to get them to want to resolve it and to get them to agree on common points, and that's really what makes it successful. Like I said, we got some very good mediators in this county.
Before our time expires, and there's really a lot of input people are getting that community forum here that they wouldn't get otherwise, you know, so I really appreciate both of you coming. Also, the producer of this program, my director of community forum, Mr. B.J. Coleman, and I think, Mr. Gomez, you know him, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, he's a great person. What about international child study, Mr. Gomez? How does that work?
Well, in international child studies, really, I mean, in domestic relations field, I think what it basically deals with is the Hague Convention. I think is where I think you want me to go in this direction on parental abduction cases that take place where a parent one person marries a foreign dissident or a citizen of another country, and during this measure somehow this foreign dissident leaves the country with a child. And what encompasses the Hague Convention. What the Hague Convention basically is an agreement between different countries that are reached as part of this Hague Act that basically they're in agreement to deal with cases of parental abductions by being able to prevent these from happening or reversing it sometimes of what it has happened. But that's through the State Department. It's a very complex thing. You can get online and probably spend 2 or 3 nights reading all about the Hague Convention like I have. And it's very involved, but it does involve the court system at times, federal or state, either or.
Okay.
In a lot of these cases. But it's a very hard, complex case, sometimes a very expensive case, with sometimes an unknown consequence at the end, especially if it's a non-Hague Act country.
Well, and that's the one thing that comes up in front of us periodically, because you do have individuals going through a divorce, and one of the parties wants to take the kids back to visit grandma and grandpa.
Okay.
And one of the first questions you ask is whether they're a Hague Convention country. Because once that party gets back there, if it's a non-Hague country, that court system over there is not going to honor anything generally that we do here. So you have to look into those aspects. You can put language in certain judgments regarding everyone agreeing to follow that when it's a Hague country. You know, so you run into those situations periodically.
There's also a stay. Anytime you file a dissolution act, in most jurisdictions, you know, there's a stay. There's a state stay on any type of removal of children from this jurisdiction once the case has commenced without the court's approval, just because of that. Because there's other issues involving children, not only between one country and another, but there's also interstate issues as well. UCCJEA comes into play. And that's another consideration, as well as who has jurisdiction over this child once they are now there. And that's a very tricky situation, because that court has to give up their jurisdiction of this child.
Right, and generally, you know, if it's really the state that the child's lived in for at least the last 6 months. There's other tests in that UCCJEA Act, you know, but generally also what happens, I've been involved as a judge in a few situations where you really do then conference with the judge in the other jurisdiction to decide, you know, how you're going to handle the case. You look at the different elements in the UCCJEA Act and work it out and either defer or they defer to us. It just depends on the fact situation. Because sometimes people try to leave the state with the child and file somewhere else and they don't have you know, jurisdiction yet in that state. And lots of times then the parent here will rush in to order the child back. Okay. So you can run into those situations. They're all fact-driven cases, so it's and I think back on the point of international law, when I was an attorney, I handled one case where a former United States serviceman went back to Japan and grabbed his child from the mother, who was Japanese national, brought the child to Lake County, Illinois, had an order of protection entered to keep mom from getting the child, and he might have been completely accurate in his petition for order of protection. I came in and represented the Japanese national, and eventually the court here ruled in my client's favor, and the child went back to Japan. But you had the Japanese consulate in Chicago involved in the case. They came up to my office. They were very concerned about this. And it was an interesting case. And the mother initially got charged with a felony because she tried to grab the kid. And there was at least a valid order on paper giving dad the kid. So that had to work through. That case got dismissed, and eventually mom got the child back.
I would think that there'll be more cases now. We got more marriages taking place now than before, I guess. And I know I have a cousin that he living in Germany now since he got got out of service, you know. So I guess there's no problem. He's over there. You know?
I don't see a real uptick in those cases, at least in Lake County. I mean, they come every now and then. There's always concerns that the child won't be returned if they're allowed to take a vacation somewhere. So those are the different, like I mentioned before, some of the issues that have to be looked into each time. And it's really important because there are some couple fairly large countries out there like India that are not part of the Hague Convention. You know, so now and then when I have cases involving people who are citizens or have relatives living in India, that comes up probably more so in those cases than some others.
Well, I think that covered mediation. There's Okay, details, any details that I may have missed?
I can't think of any tonight.
Because we say if mediation is successful, if the parties agree, then I guess is
Correct.
You know.
On all issues or some issues. Sometimes it's partially successful. It comes back with some agreements, and the other part either has to be litigated or worked out through a pretrial. And like I said, the day we had a volunteer mediator doing 4 cases in my courtroom. 2 were fully worked out, and 1 was partially worked out.
In the mediation process, though, what should the 2 parties bring with them to the mediation?
Depends what the issues are, but you know, and lots of times the mediator is going to request they bring certain documents in. Just like when we had this volunteer mediation program with the pro se's, I will put on the order that sends it to volunteer mediation what they need to bring in if it's a financial issue in particular. You know, we have what they call 1102 financial affidavits, and we have them fill it out so the mediator can get a look at what the finances are of the parties, you know, and records of their income from work or tax returns and things like that in the simpler cases. In the more complex cases where you're dealing with wealthy families, you know, they're probably going to a private mediator appointed by the court. And on our mediation list, you do have the amount that the mediator charges. They can charge anywhere from under $200 an hour up to $400 or $500 an hour, depending on the firm.
Wow, wow. Well, I want to thank both of you for taking time from your very busy schedules, you know, to be with us. I think, Mr. Gomez, you're on a short notice, and so we're going to have to make sure that you compensated highly.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks.
For being on the show.
Just as highly as you compensate all of your guests, right?
You're right.
Dr. Brooks?
Right. So we want to thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with exemplary law profession people here. The Lake County Circuit Judge Jay Ukana of the 19th Judicial Circuit, and he's the presiding judge of the Family Division, matter of fact, since 2008. We also been talking with attorney Gonzalo Gomez, attorney at law, and specializes in domestic relations and also criminal defense. And we hope that the information that they have promulgated on family division and family court mediation has been very valuable to you, and just in case that you may know someone to need it, we're sure that you're not going to need it. This has been Community Forum. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks Sr., your host.